No matter what kind of photographer you are, you're going to take portraits at some point. Whether it's taking photos of your girlfriend or your mates or your pets or even just random people on the street who ask for one, believe me, that happens. I think we can all agree it's a good idea for our portraits to be good portraits. But I'll be honest, making portraits look cool and artsy instead of like a LinkedIn profile photo was one of the first things I really struggled with as a photographer. And it took a lot of trial and error to figure out what was going on. So how do we take a not boring portrait? How do we get them to look artsy-fartsy and stylized and not awkward and posed? Speaking of posing, how do we direct people who aren't models and get them to be themselves? And most importantly of all, how do we find and tell a story about our subject? The first step to take a really cool portrait is to understand what makes a rubbish one. Portraits are a way to tell a story about someone, right? So when you take a photo like this, the only story you're really telling is, this is what Hunter's face looks like. I don't know about you, but I don't think that that's a very interesting story. I think I'd much rather tell the viewer about what the subject is like, how they interact with the world around them, and what they do. But the thing is, if you try to do all of that without a specific goal in mind, you might struggle a little bit. I find it's really useful to have a specific mood or theme in mind before you shoot. And so most of the time, the first thing I do is throw together a little mood board. This is so useful both for you so that you can reference it and check that you're on the right track, and it's also useful for your subject since they can understand what kind of a vibe you're after and how that relates to them and their personality. I like to make my mood boards in an infinite Figma canvas just because that works for my brain, but you can do this with a Google Doc or Photoshop or a Pinterest board or whatever works for you. When you make the mood board, please don't make the mistake of trying to use it like it's a goal board. You don't want to just find photos you like and then copy them, and you don't want the mood board to just be portraiture either. It's a mood board. You want a mood, a feeling. If your photos don't make the viewer feel something, then you've done something wrong. So instead of focusing on how the photos on your mood board look, focus on how they make you feel. It's also useful to think about the purpose of a shoot. Why are you telling a story about this person? Is it your down bad roommate who needs a Hinge photo? Is it to share someone's passion for their hobby? Do you want to create a fine art gallery style portrait? Or do you want to show off a funny hat? When you know how you want to feel and what you want to communicate to the viewer of the photo, it's much easier to get results that look good. Once you've done your planning and it's time to shoot, the very first thing that will go wrong is that you're not working with a professional model, and so the very first thing they'll say is, what do you want me to do? That's a really hard question to answer, and a lot of skill and practice goes into being able to get people to relax and be themselves in front of camera. Getting people to relax is one thing, but getting people to be themselves is more subtle and it's harder to notice, especially if you don't know them very well. Whenever we're in front of the camera, we do act differently no matter who we are, and so breaking through that false appearance is really the key to getting a great photo of someone. There are a few tricks that you can use to make this a lot easier. The first one is to shoot a lot. When you're constantly taking photos, you'll eventually get to one where they've let their guard down for a moment. Another way that you can do this that's a little more constructed is kind of what I like to call semi-candids, where you stage up a portrait the way you want it, but then you kind of do the adult equivalent of jangling keys in front of a baby and catch a moment where they're being completely themselves. A great trick for this is to get one of your subject's friends to come along and distract them and get them laughing while you're taking photos. If you don't have that option, another really great trick that I like to use is to get them to stand on their tiptoes. Seriously, try it. It's very hard to maintain your iPhone selfie perfect face while you're concentrating on balancing. And because it's a little bit silly, it's always quite fun. I personally really like to tell stories about what people do, and so that's another great way to get them to forget that they're in a photo shoot. Whether that's playing guitar or reading or having a coffee, if you set up your camera in a subtle way and then just allow the subject to get into a flow state, it'll make a massive difference. But aside from all of those tips and tricks, a big part of getting that natural, real look is simply just getting the subject to relax and feel safe and trust you. Cameras can feel really confrontational if you're not used to being in front of one constantly like me, and so a lot of the time You just need to chat and have a laugh and build some rapport with your subject. Personally, in my portrait sessions, I never talk about the camera gear or the photos at all. I won't even flip the camera around and show them the portraits on the back screen. I think when you do that, you are reminding them constantly that they're supposed to be performing. Instead, I prefer to talk all about them. How are they feeling? What are they doing? How do they feel about the things going on in their life recently? But getting your subject to act natural is only one part of the puzzle. If that's all you do, you'll just take a LinkedIn photo that's more authentic. Now it's your turn to put in the work and add some spice and flavor and style into the photos. When I take portraits, I like to go quite heavy on the look. That's partially my style, but it's also really useful. I want the photo itself visually to make it really obvious that it's constructed and intentional. Lens choice, shutter speed, flash, all of these can make a really big impact on the photo in a way that makes it obvious that the goal is aesthetics and art and not, here is what this person's face looks like so you can recognize them. With shutter speed, adding deliberate motion blur is a really fun way to spice things up and create a mood. This is also really good for candids at parties and nights out. A lot of the time, it can be kind of hard to know what settings to use for slow shutter photography, which is why I've teamed up with today's video sponsor, Framer. Framer is a really cool way to create and publish websites, so I used it to make slowshutterspeeds.com, where you can see loads of examples of slow shutter photos and the exact settings that I used to take them. It was so fun and easy to set this up. I went through Framer's really nice library of templates and I found one that was great for showing off photos. It would be a great option for you if you need a portfolio or a place on the internet to put a project that you're working on. Then I just jumped into the editor and made a few tweaks to the fonts and colors and uploaded all of my photos. Once I typed in what I wanted to say, it was done, and it literally couldn't have been easier. But the really great thing about Framer is that if you do want to get in the thick of it and do custom stuff, you can. There are also really powerful analytics, there's A/B testing, and there's even localization so that you can share your ideas all over the planet. With all of the stuff going on with social media right now, it's a better time than ever to take control over how your art is shown online, and doing that with Framer is quick, easy, and super customizable. You really have no excuse not to make a portfolio or a landing page for your ideas this weekend, so click the link in the video description to sign up to Framer and get 25% off your first 3 months. A massive thank you to Framer and to you for supporting what I do. But aside from shutter speed, you can also use hard, unrealistic flash to make a statement. Sometimes I even put the flash in the photo. I think this is probably one of my favorite ways to shoot, actually, since it gives me so much control over the look and feel of the portraits. I also love to take portraits on not portrait lenses. If you Google what the best lens for portraits is, the awful AI summary will tell you that it's an 85mm full frame equivalent. I respectfully disagree. I think long focal lengths are great for making faces look good, but I don't necessarily think, for me, that they're great at making portraits look good. I love to use wide angle lenses for portraiture for a couple of reasons. One, wider lenses have more distortion, so they add to that constructed look, again, making it obvious that the photo was created and it's not just a snapshot. But I also really appreciate that with wider lenses, I can be physically closer to my subject. This really helps make it feel like me and the subject are working together to create something, rather than them being a deer in the headlights with me standing 40 feet away with a zoom lens. But the main reason I like to use wide lenses for portraits is that it allows me to include more of the person and some of where they are. Context. A lot of the time people will call this style of portraiture environmental portraiture because you can see where the person is. But I think it's even more fun to take things a step further and instead of posing the subject, have them doing something. This opens up so much more storytelling opportunity than them just looking at the camera, and it means we can create way more feelings and questions in the viewer. Where are they? What are they doing? And why are they doing it? But just as important as the subject, what's in the background? What's happening in the background and the foreground? The space between you and your subject is so underused, and I think it's a really great way to add story, add depth, and add visual fun to your photos. Lately, I've really been trying to take portraits where the subject is sandwiched between a really interesting foreground and a really interesting background, and I think it makes a massive difference to the final product. You can keep it simple and have some silhouettes of stuff or like really blurry tall grass in the foreground just to direct your viewer's eye around the frame, or you can get really crazy with it and put all sorts of odd things in the way. And I think that when you combine all of these techniques, you won't just take better portraits, but the people you photograph will be happier with the results, and you'll start to develop a really good sense of what you want your personal style to be. And as a bonus, you'll be able to take a really good LinkedIn photo. Earlier in the video, I mentioned Flash, and I think it's a really important skill to learn because you can control the entire look of your image just with Flash. Watch this video next, and I'll show you how. Stay hydrated and create art.